Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome author, speaker, and your host today, Mark Jeffries.
Oh, thank you for that rousing round of applause. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let's talk disruption, shall we? Look, we've all been disrupted. It's not even a surprise anymore. You know, Uber is, of course, the go-to example. But just think of it. You stand on a street corner, you press the app, you get a stranger to come and pick you up in his car and take you all the way home. It's everything our parents warned us not to do. We've been disrupted, but of course the disruption continues and it's accelerating, and we need as much information as we can get to help us on this journey. Well, good news, people. We have one of today's most sought-after thought leaders with us this afternoon. Geoffrey Moore is here. He's the chairman, founder, and managing partner of TCG Advisors, a consulting practice that provides marketing strategy and organizational services to a multitude of high-tech companies. Now, his many books, and I'm sure you've read some of them, including Crossing the Chasm, Escape Velocity, and Zone to Win, all bestsellers. And if you remember Crossing the Chasm, Geoffrey looked at the challenge for startups bringing innovation to the larger marketplace. Well, in his most recent book, Zone to Win, and this evening right now, he's going to look at the reverse. Larger, established enterprises trying to do the same thing. You think it'd be easy? It's not, and you're about to find out why and how. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Geoffrey Moore.
Have fun. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Well, thank you very much. Look, gosh, it's inspiring to be here at the World of Watson. Every time you realize how much innovation is around us, it's staggering. And the things that we talked about this morning, that Tom Frieden was talking about, David Kenny and all the people, there's a spectacular amount of resources. And the anxiety that I think happens in a large enterprise is, how do we catch the next wave? I mean, we get that it's there, we have some money, we have resources to play against it, we get that it's relevant. It's not a strategy problem. It's a crisis of prioritization. We come to a situation where we get to the next marginal dollar. We say, do we put that into the existing business or do we put that into the new venture? And at some point, there's not enough dollars to go around. And at that point, large organizations struggle tremendously. It typically happens during the annual budget process. And at that time, the resource allocation crisis hits. And to date, we have not had good frameworks for handling that challenge. And as a result, we've not had great success as established enterprises in leveraging the innovation that we see all around us, and that we've certainly seen all around us this week. So this book, Zone to Win, is designed to create a fairly simple framework to use during the annual budgeting process to address this crisis of prioritization and give us an on-ramp for bringing innovation into an established enterprise, which already has other serious interests that conflict with that agenda. So I want to kind of show you how that plays out. So if you look just one slide on the disruptive innovation, because we've been talking about disruptive innovation a lot in high tech. I come from Silicon Valley. We're sort of the land of disruption. And so one of the questions you want to ask is, and your colleagues will ask of you, is, well, which disruptive innovation and why now? So I think this title at the top of this slide really is an important clue. A disruptive innovation becomes actionable in your company and in your industry when it takes the marginal cost of something that used to be expensive and requires scarce expertise and brings it very close to zero. So if you look at the disruptive innovations that we're in the midst of right now, Tom Frieden was talking about this morning, you start with cloud computing. Cloud computing has made the ability to deploy software globally at scale virtually free. Now, it's not free for your company. Your company has data centers and established investments in existing, and when cloud computing comes in, you have to add cloud computing onto a legacy, and you have to bridge it, so it's not free. But if you're Aaron Levy and you're a sophomore at USC starting Box, it is free. It's virtually free. So the disruptor gets the opportunity to deploy software globally, essentially for free. Which raises the question, would you do something differently if you designed your company that software is free? Because we all designed our companies when software was anything but free. The same thing happens with smartphones. Smartphones now says you can communicate with 1 billion going to 2 billion people across the planet essentially for free. You don't buy the phone, you don't pay for the phone time, you don't pay for the internet. They're available 7x24 for free. Do we design our business process? But again, not free for you. We still have legacy CRM systems, we have call centers, we have very expensive ways of communicating. But Airbnb doesn't, Uber doesn't. They're designing businesses for free. So all of a sudden you have to ask yourself, if you're Hilton Hotel or your Boston Limo, what are you doing? Because all of a sudden the disruption has now become actionable in your industry, whether you wanted it to or not. Machine learning is the next one. So all of the log files that come from those mobile phones have allowed people in advertising and in media and even in social services to read those log files, to infer from the digital footprints that we leave in our digital lives. Where are we? What are we? What do we care about? What are we most likely to want to buy? What are we most likely to want to learn about? Who are we most likely to vote for? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of a sudden now you can see into the consumer behavior much more deeply. And again, opening up this opportunity to say not half my advertising budget is not going to be wasted in a digital world because I won't spend it. Because the machine learning will help me. And you go to the Internet of Things and you realize if machine learning can optimize any digital system, and you put a sensor on any object in the world, you just made it digital. So the Internet of Things says you can optimize any physical system. Now these things are not as far dispersed yet as cloud computing and smartphones, but you can see that they're coming. So if I can optimize any physical system, when do I have to worry about that in my industry? Well, already the oil field people are very, very deep into Internet of Things. And you're looking at people like GE and the industrial people who have large, industrial assets that the predictive analytics that would come from optimizing a physical system using machine learning is huge. And then this morning we hear about cognitive computing. And cognitive computing is probably the highest, it's just coming onto our radar right now. And it says you can optimize any intellectual system. Machine learning, by the way, doesn't do that. So what Watson is doing is it's absorbing the corpus of the Western and Eastern intellectual traditions, and it's making it accessible in real time. We saw that with the amazing thing with cancer and the cancer diagnosis, taking the entire body of knowledge around cancer and putting it into one system and making it accessible. We see the same thing with that Watson chef. So now you can take the world of food and do that. And everywhere there's a corpus of knowledge that we can play into to make expert decisions and make decisions of judgment. Machine learning does not make decisions of judgment, but cognitive computing does. So the question to each one of these is, when this, and by the way, cognitive computing isn't free yet, but today's announcements are going to go a long way. Today's announcements, because and by the way, Salesforce doing Einstein and SAP and Oracle, everybody's getting into this game. And they're going to try to make it part of the fabric, the digital fabric that is revolutionizing our world. So this stuff is available. And so the idea here is, look, maybe it's not this year. Maybe it was 2 years ago. Maybe it's not for 2 years. But this is the kind of question you want to ask about your company, your industry. Where do we need to act? I was with, the folks at Wells Fargo the other day, not the folks that were opening the other accounts, other people. But the point is, they said, look, in our world, cloud computing, we're a very big institution. We can kind of run our own cloud. Not a big deal. Smartphones, table stakes. Retail branch banking is going away in the United States. We need to play the entire game on a mobile phone. Machine learning, you betcha. Machine learning for us is critical for underwriting and those kinds of things. Internet of Things, not so much. Cognitive computing, just hitting their radar. But it's be different for different companies. So the first question is, look, this is digital, and it's changing the design rules. And so it's asking us, we need to catch the next wave. Now, which wave will be different for each company and each industry? Which set of waves? But we're going to catch something. And so you say, okay, great, high tech, lots of waves. Catching waves, you guys must be really great at catching waves. Not so much. If you start reading this chart from the bottom and read upward, when you get to the row where you don't recognize the names, that's when you came into the industry. Okay? But this thing goes all the way to the top for me because I've been in the industry for a while. But these were not the bad companies. These were not the losers. These companies crushed it in their first wave. But when they went to catch the next wave, they couldn't do it. And so and you can't say, well, we had that many bad companies. Those were our best companies. So why was this so hard? And Clay Christensen and his colleagues took a shot at figuring that out a while ago when they were they did the Innovator's Dilemma, which is a really, really useful book. And it said, look, here's some of the conflicts we're dealing with. But we didn't really nail it. Because a lot of the companies said Innovator's Dilemma came out about halfway down that chart. And if it had done the job, we wouldn't have had the bottom half of the page. So something's still broken. So if you look at it and you say, why is it so hard? I think the framework that helps a lot is one that's popularized by some folks at McKinsey about 10 or 15 years ago. A guy named Mehrdad Bagai wrote a book called The Alchemy of Growth. And he introduced this idea called the 3 horizons, and it applies directly to the annual budgeting process. And what it says is, in the annual budgeting process, when we hand out the resources, when the CFO hands out the resources with the whole executive committee, the question they ask is, when do I get my money back? If I give you this resource, when do I get paid back? And there are 3 legitimate answers to that question. Answer number 1 is this year. This year, Horizon 1. You give me more salespeople in January, I'll give you more revenue, I'll give you more bookings in December. You give me more engineers, I'll give you more software. This year. So Horizon 1 is a very quick return on investment. This is where all the ROI looks really, really good. Not surprisingly, big established companies do very well there. That's the flywheel that makes the company run. The rap against big established companies was they couldn't innovate. They were really bad at innovation. They were just too stuck in their ways. They couldn't do Horizon 3 stuff. The really crazy, wonderful stuff. That's just baloney. It turns out if you went into the R&D labs of IBM, of Nokia, of HP, of Bell Labs, if you went to Xerox PARC invented Silicon Valley. It was fabulous at Horizon 3. There's a ton of stuff in most established enterprises, technology enterprises, that it's just an embarrassment of riches. The problem is not getting the innovation started. The problem is bringing it to scale. So Horizon 2 is the period where you have to take something that you've invented in Horizon 3 and bring it into a material business that will affect your economic realities in Horizon 1. And that's where we get stuck. That's where it gets stuck. And so to net this out, because I was trying to find a simple way to sort of net this out, my tagline for this problem is, if you want to catch an S-curve, one of these things that Tom Friedman was describing, the hockey stick, if you want to catch one of these waves of innovation, you have to go through a J-curve. Okay? The J-curve is a very familiar curve to venture capitalists. When you are a startup, you go through a J-curve. Interestingly, the reason why the startup problem is so different, everybody in the venture community is in favor of putting money into a J-curve. The limited partners who give capital to the venture capitalists to invest want them to invest in J-curves. The venture capitalists interview entrepreneurs. All they interview for is business plans that have big, whopping J-curves in them. And they only fund the ones that are the most exciting to them. And if you join a venture-backed startup, you know you're on a J-curve journey, which means you have one priority and one priority only, which is get your head back above water before you run out of money. Okay? That's the whole game. So it's a hard game to play, but nobody's conflicted about where we're going. And there is zero resistance in that ecosystem. This is why it's so hard. People come to Silicon Valley all the time to learn about innovation. I don't think so. Silicon Valley is this. Silicon Valley does not have the challenge of the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, you go and you say, well, okay, hey, we've got a really exciting thing. Isn't this wonderful? You go to your investors. What do you think? J-curve. They go, eh. No. We want to do J-curves. We'll put our money in venture capital. No, stick to your knitting. You're really good. Earnings per share. Okay, you got that? Okay, return on invested capital. Steady as she goes. Stay with your business. You went through a J-curve sometime in the past. Don't do it again. Okay? How about your salespeople? Hey, you want to sell this thing? It's amazing. Yeah, but I want to go to club, you know? I want to make my quota and go to club. I can't make my quota selling this new thing. Nobody has any budget for it. By the way, it doesn't really work yet. I mean, it needs a lot of work. We have no partners that know how to use it or help us. And by the way, it takes forever, and I don't even know the right people. And by the way, the customer I've been selling to for the last 2 years is going to be disrupted by this thing, and so they hate it. So no, I don't want to sell the new thing. And the sales management comes in right behind and says, are you kidding me? Are you serious about me making my number? I mean, I can put some resources on this thing, but not a lot, because I need those resources to make my number. So do you want me to make my number? And even your customers, so you say, well, look, your customers will get excited. Well, the early adopters will. That's what the technology adoption lifecycle is all about. But the pragmatists won't. The pragmatists will say, well, let's wait until this thing is ready for prime time. So you can come and give me a demo. In fact, I'd like to even go do a seminar, okay? And we'll do a pilot in Alaska, right? But nothing close to home, okay? And so, and then your partners are going, what are you doing? We have this sweet thing. This is a great business. Don't screw it up, okay? So what you realize when you look at this thing is, it is not a natural act. When you look at the innovation funnel, and the reason why I say that with surprise in my voice is all my life I had this image of the innovation pipeline as a funnel. You put stuff in the top of the funnel, it kind of winnowed its ways out as you went down through the funnel. You came to the end of the funnel, and the good stuff came out the bottom. And you know what? That's a good model for sustaining innovations. It's not a good model for disruptive innovations. Disruptive innovations, it turns out, the world actually is excited about them when they're in Horizon 3. They're kind of like new grandchildren, right? I don't know if you have any grandchildren. They're like, by the way, that's the best thing that can ever happen to you. I hope you have lots of them. But they're just absolutely adorable, and you're totally irresistible, okay? Then they become teenagers. They go into a tunnel. It's not quite clear where they are for about 6 years. But that's a little bit like Horizon 2. Then if they can get out the other end and be earning adults and citizens, God bless. So Horizon 1, we love you. Horizon 3, we love you. Horizon 2, not so much. So the problem with a disruptive innovation is, how do you get it through the choke point in the hourglass? And the first thing to realize is it is a choke point. It's not a funnel. It is an hourglass. So disruptive innovations, bringing them to scale, we thought all those companies, all those 54 companies that I listed, because they were tech companies in particular, and because they'd already done it once, they thought it was a natural act to do it again. It's not a natural act. It puts your entire organization and your ecosystem in conflict with itself. And it turns out that that's a solvable problem, but not until you acknowledge that you have the problem. So you cannot go into this situation saying, well, look, we've got a normal budgeting process, we've got lots of salespeople, we have marketing, we've got global services, we can make this work. We don't, you know, we can run our business and still do this at the same time. Yes, you can start. You can start a J-curve at any time, and the first year is not too bad. The second year is worse, and the third year, most people flake out. They just, I can't take this anymore. We got to find some way to stop. So what's going on? How do we sort this thing out? Well, this is where the zone management model came in. This came from work that we were doing with Mark Benioff and his team at Salesforce, and with Satya Nadella and his team at Microsoft. So two really, really, really good companies who both said, look, I can't live with the idea of being 55 and 56 on that list, Geoffrey. So how would we sort this thing out? So what this zone thing says is, it says, okay, look, you got to obviously think about your existing business, the sustaining innovations, differently than disruptive. And everybody gets that. They say, yeah, I got that. And the other thing is, you got to realize who's bringing in the cash, and then where are we spending money? And you say, okay, I got that too. Okay? So that creates 4 zones. The performance zone, that's Horizon 1. That's the place where, you know, you're going to make all the money that you're going to report to your investors this year. You're going to show your results to your partners and your customers and your investors and everybody this year. This is where all the bonuses are going to get paid out of. This is what makes the money. And beneath that is all the cost centers, the productivity zone, where basically you do all the work behind the scenes so that the people who are making the money in the performance zone, can be productive, effective, and compliant with regulations, et cetera. So this is where the productivity zone is where you'd have things like finance, legal, HR, IT, marketing, customer service, procurement, a lot of stuff. Performance zone is basically people who sell what you make and make what you sell. So the people that own the lines of business are there, and the people that own the sales channels are there, and nobody else. If you don't have a number in your comp program, you're not in the performance zone. You're probably in the productivity zone. And then there's the incubation zone, which is where you put your Horizon 3 stuff. And then the fourth zone, the zone that is designed, that is not, and by the way, those three zones exist, I would predict, in your company today. All three of them. All three of you have some a visible presence in all three zones. In fact, I'll bet I could walk into your buildings and find the zone, because those zones don't hang out with each other. They're usually in different buildings, or at least on different floors. Okay? The transformation zone doesn't exist in your company right now. It's the place you go to get through Horizon 2. And so if you look at that, you say, okay, I guess that's it. So in other words, transformation zone is when you're going to deliver material revenue from something that starts off with a very small base. And the material revenue is probably 10% of your total revenue. Until a disruptive innovation is generating about 10% of your total revenue, most people don't, it's still on probation. People aren't really sure it's part of your future. They're looking at it, they're interested in it, they're fascinated by it, but they're not giving you credit for it. Somewhere along the line, when it jumps past 10% of revenue, all of a sudden, some very wonderful things happen, because you're going to get credit for that whole new business in your stock price, in your partner relationships, in your customer relationships. But until you get to that level of materiality, you're on probation. That's what that zone's for getting you through that probationary period. So, the thing that's interesting about these four zones is four very different cultures. And each one has its own priorities, and each one has a legitimate claim to a portion of the enterprise's resources and loyalty. Every one of these zones has a legitimate culture, but they're very different from the other three. So in the performance zone, it's a lot about make your number. It's a very competitive, achievement-oriented place. You certainly see this in sales contests and getting to club, but you also see this with people who are growing their business year after year after year. Make the number, okay? Just do it. The productivity zone is a much more collaborative organization, and is focused on doing the right thing. Do the right thing financially. The whole thing about the audit, the Watson audit example that was given during the keynote today. Do the right thing by our employees. Do the right thing by our community. Do the right thing legally. Do the right thing in terms of the kind of IT systems that we need, the kind of visibility into our business. And it's a collaboration culture. It's about being supportive, primarily for the performance zone. Be there for them. Do whatever it takes to help them be successful. And then the incubation zone is much more about no. Let go of the past, or that's somebody else's issue. We're going to start with much more of like a clean sheet of paper, and we're going to invent the future. And it's much more of a creativity culture. And fail fast, make mistakes, agile, DevOps, go. And as I said, I think you have all three of those cultures today in your company. It's kind of fun when I deal with companies, because each culture, each zone, feels slightly superior to the other two. So the people in the incubation zone, they're pretty sure they're somewhere between 10 and 20 IQ points more intelligent than you are, if you're not in their zone. And they think you should run the sustaining stuff, but leave the future to us, because you guys, frankly, are kind of admired in the past. And the people in the performance zone are going, you do realize that we're paying for everything here. That we're the only people that actually make any money around here. So we're paying for all the checks. And the people in the productivity zone are going, are we the only adults in the room? I mean, we're the only people that actually care? But the truth is, those three zones, we kind of get them working together. It works. We're able to put together something that works. When you go to the fourth zone, the priority is we are going to change course and speed. We are going to reallocate resources in a very unusual way across these zones, and that has to be a command culture with the CEO's hands on the tiller. Okay? That's, if you look at the people, the successes where people have caught the next wave, by far the most familiar are the ones where it's the founding CEO. It's Steve Jobs, it's Jeff Bezos, it's Larry Ellison, it's Mark Benioff, it's Larry and Sergey, it's Mark Zuckerberg. Founding CEOs have always had this ability to change course and speed because they have enough clout, they have enough charisma, they have enough history, they just do it. But most established enterprises are run by management teams where the founder is not the CEO. And so what we need to say is we need a principled way to have a discussion across the executive committee, the board of directors, to say, if we are going to change course and speed, how are we actually going to get that done? And that's what the zone management frameworks are for. And so the way it works out, let me baseline this by saying, in a year when you are not dealing with a transformational challenge, and my wish for you is that if you did one transformation a decade, I would think that would be world class. And I think a transformation probably is going to take you 3 years to get to material revenue. So that means 7 out of 10 years, my wish is that you'll be doing this. In a year when you're not transforming, what's the most important zone to fund first? The performance zone. That's where we're going to get next year's revenue from. Do we have enough sales capacity to make the number that we want to make? Do we have enough services and goods to earn the number that we want to make? If we don't, fund it. That's the first priority. The second priority is, okay, now programs and systems that can get more effectiveness, more efficiency out of our zone, that we want to make sure that we're, by the way, we're regulatorily compliant. We don't want to go to jail. How do we do all that stuff? That's the productivity zone. And those two zones split up, I don't know, 95% plus of the annual budget. And they sort of sort out who gets what. There is money left over for the incubation zone, but not very much. Not noticeable. It's not so much money that in the annual report it would just jump out of you and go, oh my gosh, what are you guys doing? Okay? So that envelope, and there's no transformation zone. It's just another year of essentially pursuing the business that we're famous for, our ecosystem thinks we're in, our customers think we're in. Another great year of just doing that again, which is a big deal. I mean, it's where most taxes get paid, it's where most people get employed. It's a wonderful, wonderful backbone of stability for society. That is a year in which you harvest your rewards and you build up your reserves. Because you're going to need them. What are you going to need them? Well, there are two conditions. The first condition is when you voluntarily decide you have something in your incubation zone that is so exciting, you now want to voluntarily engage in a disruptive transformation. You didn't have to, but you're so excited about it, you say, nope, we're going to, it's Ginny Rometty with Watson, okay? So what are you going to do with Watson? I'm going to bring it into the transformation zone. Well, what does that mean? That means when we allocate resources this next year, Watson, or I shouldn't manage IBM for Ginny, any other company. Our company is going to prioritize funding that business before we fund anything else. Anything else. Until it's fully funded in every possible dimension, we're not doing anything else. Once we've done that, then the performance zone comes second, and then the productivity zone comes third. And by the way, the incubation zone should quiesce itself because we're just making a whopping big reallocation of resources, which is going to take a lot of resources away from the other zones. Now, this is a very strange time because the leaders in the performance zone say, you know, you're taking so much resources away from my plan, I don't know that I can make my number. Don't you want me to make my number? And by the way, the answer that all 54 of those companies said was, you have to make your number. They said, great, I will. That's the wrong answer. If you start a J-curve, you must never, never, never not finish it. The worst thing you can do to your company is start a J-curve and not get all the way through it. So if you start, and this is a voluntary start, you cannot, that has to be the #1 priority until that thing is up at the other side going forward. And if you miss your number in the middle, and by the way, you very well might, that's the price you pay. If you're not willing to pay that price, and by the way, many companies are not, then don't go in. Because the worst thing you can do is start and not get through. So this is saying, if we're going to do this, we're going to enlist everyone in making the big change. And you'll see what I mean by everyone in 2 slides. But I don't mean just the people that are running the disruptive business. I mean everybody, every executive in the company has to make that their #1 priority. That one, by the way, is not frequent. I would say 1 out of 10 companies that I know that are dealing with transformation fit this model. I mean, really, you have to have something really extraordinary, and you have to have a degree of just boldness or authority or whatever it is. And most companies, that seems like a stretch. So where are the other 9 of the 10? They're not in, by the way, this was Salesforce's model. They're not in Salesforce's situation. They're in Microsoft's situation. So what's Microsoft's situation? Microsoft enters this century with the 3 most successful businesses in high tech of my career: Windows, Office, and their back office software businesses. And in the space of 10 years, all 3 businesses come under existential threat. Not they have tough competition. They have competition that eliminates the need for that product entirely. The most obvious of this right now with Microsoft is Windows. In 2001, I would estimate that Windows was 85% of every edge device ran Windows. Today, last quarter, earlier this year, less than 20% of the devices bought for the edge ran Windows. The whole mobile revolution has completely changed the operating system landscape. Windows operating system is under existential threat. In this new, and then cloud computing, by the way, puts back office software under existential threat. If you're going to be doing your computing in the cloud, you're not going to be buying that software. Maybe your cloud provider is, but that's a different issue. And Office, which is their productivity software, which has been their strongest asset of the last 10 years, has historically relied on being put on top of Windows. Well, Windows is not there anymore. So all 3 businesses are under existential threat. Here's the lesson that I think, and I'm not sure that, this started under Ballmer, but I think Satya should get more credit than anybody else. For the realization, if your core business is under existential threat, if you're a hotel business and Airbnb has surrounded you, if you are a transportation business and Uber has surrounded you, if you are a media business and Facebook has surrounded you, or Google has surrounded you, if you are in home entertainment or cable TV and Netflix has surrounded you, you're under existential threat. To solve that, you cannot fix that problem by leaving the business in the performance zone. You have to take it out of the performance zone and bring it into the transformation zone. What does that mean? That means I'm going to release you from your performance zone commitments. Because we can't fix this business and have you make your number quarter after quarter after quarter. That's not going to work. That's what we learned from Kodak. Kodak could not take its core business out of the performance zone. Neither could Xerox. So the game here is we're going to take it out, we're going to bring it into the transformation zone, and we are going to go into our incubation zone, and we're going to find whatever the hell we can find there, plus we will acquire whatever we need to acquire in order to modernize that business. Microsoft doesn't have to get ahead of Google or get ahead of Apple or get ahead of Facebook or get ahead of anybody else. What they have to do is get their business back in the game. And so the first wave of that was their back office business, which they took to Azure, to their cloud. And right now, that was a hideous journey in terms of a J-curve, because that back office software business was supremely profitable, and in Azure even today, the margins are not particularly attractive yet. But the point was they got it through the J-curve. And now Azure is the second leading network, well behind Amazon. But for enterprises, a very attractive alternative, okay? They got through the J-curve. Microsoft gets credit. If you look at their stock price, they're getting a ton of credit now for Azure. It's more than 10% of their total revenue. They're getting credit for it. The way that Apple eventually got credit for being in the music business, and then they got credit for being in the phone business. But until you get through the J-curve, you don't get credit for it. Right now, they're doing it with Office. So Office is in the transformation zone, and it's going to Office 365. Again, nowhere near as attractive or profitable as Office just on a desktop or a laptop or whatever. And by the way, on mobile, they're giving it away. They're giving it away. So you get Office for free on Android or Office for free on iOS, okay? Or Windows, but there's very vanishingly small Windows phone population. So the transformation zone is a place where you take whatever technology resources you have and you bring that business into the new world. You neutralize the disruption. You don't have to disrupt the disruptor. You just have to fight the disruptor off so that you're back in the game. People do not want to change vendors. They want to stay with you. They just have to see you're keeping up. And so the performance zone comes in third in this game. And by the way, it is highly unlikely that you can get through this game without having a highly visible impact on your financial reporting, your financial results. The quote, good news there is, everybody in the world knows you're under existential threat. So you get much more slack from the investment community for a zone defense than you do for zone offense, okay? Because people kind of see that, yeah, if you don't do something, you're kind of toast. So they actually get a lot of credit. And you've watched Microsoft get an extraordinary amount of credit over the last 4 years. Whereas for the prior 10 years, they got almost no credit. And it's because people recognize that they were under existential threat. So when you're under an existential threat, you have to enlist everyone in modernizing the key business. So this transformation zone, it's not a place that you use a lot. But I want to make clear what the playbook is, because I think those 54 companies understood that they needed something, but they didn't have the right playbook. So the playbook is this. The first rule is, if you're doing a transformation, there is nothing that is more important in the corporation than getting through that J-curve and getting it to the other side. That means failure literally is not an option. Now you say, well, but come on, Geoffrey, 54 companies failed. Yeah, but you know what? None of them made it their number one priority. If you're telling me that there's a large corporation that puts all of its resources behind a young business and cannot get that business to 10% of their total revenue, putting every resource in their company to work on that problem, I don't believe you. It's a solvable problem. It's having the will to do it. It's having a principled discussion about, are we going to make this commitment or not? Because if we're going to make the commitment, we are going to complete the commitment. But it's a very legitimate debate to say, should we or should we not make the commitment? What you can't do is slide into this commitment. Say, well, we'll get it started, we'll see how it turns out. No, that will turn out badly. Okay? So yes, you have to make the number wherever you can, but it's not the number one priority. The second thing, total alignment is required. The CEO is in command. The CEO secures the resources necessary for the new business. The new narrative is also for the investors. The board of directors has to be completely aligned around this. The executive compensation, not just for the leader of the new business, not just for the CEO, for everybody has to be tied to the success of the new business. Because if it is, if you literally thought that half of your bonus was to depend on getting this one business to 10% of revenue, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. If you won't figure it out, your spouse will figure it out, right? Because they'll say, come on, we need your bonus, right? So it's a possible thing to do, but if you leave anybody out of alignment, as we'll see with the next slide, you're going to have some trouble. So key milestones, when are we done? Because this is not fun. This is painful. People are not happy during a transformation. You're done on zone offense when the new business is 10% or more of the total revenue. Somewhere around there, all of a sudden, the world changes pretty dramatically, and the world that was resisting you starts pulling you forward. If you're on zone defense, your business, which was either flat or maybe slightly decaying, is now back on a growth curve. It's not a meteoric growth curve. You don't have to get on an exponential growth curve. You just have to get onto a healthy growth curve. That means the existential threat has been met, and we are, again, a going concern. Okay? So massive stress in either case, however, on the go-to-market envelope, on your salespeople, on your service people, not so much on the back end. The back end can handle it. It's the front end. It's trying to use the same salespeople and marketing people and professional services people to do both the existing business and the new business. That's where the pain is. And it just means you can only do one at a time. But that's another mistake that the folks made. If you look at the typical mistakes that people made, there are three of them. These are the three you don't want to make. So the first one is you try to do more than one transformation at a time. Why? Because you're not sure. Yeah, it could be this one, it could be that one. And all three were ready, and the divisions brought forth these exciting products. Why wouldn't we give them a chance? Well, as long as they're in the incubation zone, you can give them a chance. But when it comes to scaling them seriously, there's too much of a resource reallocation problem. You can only do one at a time. The second thing is people would get into a J-curve and they wouldn't have really internalized how bad it is to be at the bottom of a J-curve. And so as they get close to the bottom, they kind of take their foot off the accelerator. It's death. As soon as you reduce the commitment to a J-curve in any way, the whole thing falls apart. And you end up announcing a year later, well, we decided we were not going to do that. Okay? We've folded the division into some other thing. You basically have folded your tent, and you've taught the world that you're a little bit of a chump. Okay? That's why it's so it's so disastrous to go into a J-curve with any kind of naivete. If you're going to do it, you really have to do it. And then the third one is letting anybody on the executive team say, well, I don't think that's a very good idea. I'm going to run my business my way. Most of these successful things, early on, a senior executive who's been an incredible asset for getting the company to where it is today has to be fired because they just won't buy in. And the CEO cannot allow that. They cannot send that signal to anybody in the corporation. Once we start this journey, we cannot fail. Okay? Transformations are defining moments for companies, and we simply must succeed. Now, by the way, the rewards are great. If you do succeed, you'll get incredible rewards. Well, you'll see a high-growth business added to the portfolio or an existing business brought back to health. But in either case, you're going to see a really, really attractive change to your stock price. I mean, super attractive. Well, Apple and Amazon and Salesforce are the three spectacular ones of the last decade. But anytime this happens, I mean, by the way, what that means is most high-tech companies went from about 200% of the NASDAQ to maybe 70% of the NASDAQ over that 10-year period. Salesforce Amazon Apple was like at 2,200 times. I mean, 2,200%. I think Salesforce was like 1,900. Amazon was like 1,700. Something amazing. Way, 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 way outside the norm. That's the reward. So it's a game worth playing. It's a game worth playing for, but it's not a game to take lightly. And so to close with, I want to give you a framework which would let you say, should we or should we not roll for the big dice? We're in Vegas. Should we put it all on red 36? Right? Should we or should we not? And so the idea here is there are three ways you can take disruptive technology and get value from it in your corporation. You can bring it into the infrastructure of your company, and you can use it to optimize your existing operations. That's like bringing it into the productivity zone and just doing whatever you're doing better, faster, and cheaper, and not disrupting the rest of the company, and not disrupting your ecosystem, and not bringing anything new to market. You're just doing business in a more modern, efficient way. You could say, no, I need to modernize my operating model. I need to get more mobile. I need to start using more analytics. I need to get smarter. Okay, now you're bringing it into the performance zone. You're saying, I need to change the way I sell. I need to change the way I service. I need to change the way I procure or I make. I'm going to use modern technology to change my operating model, but I'm still in the same business. I haven't changed my business model. And then the third idea is, no. We can actually change our business model. We're going to get into a business that we've never been in. We're GE. GE started by just making their services cheaper in the gray area. Then they started modifying their offers in the orange area. Now they've announced they're doing something called Predix, which is a whole new business. That's a transformation. That's Jeff Immelt saying, we're entering a new business in the GE portfolio. We have to get it to 10% of total revenue. So that's a thing where if you're just doing the gray area, you can evaluate the new technology on products. You bring in the products when they work. If you're going to do the operating model, you better have solutions that relate to your vertical, relate to your business processes that you're re-engineering. And by gosh, if you bring it into the top, this is a project. This is a once-a-decade project, and you need to treat it with that kind of dignity. So the last slide, just to share with you, is my wish for you, whether it's with Watson or any of the other disruptive technologies in your world. Bring it into your incubation zone now, if it's not already there. Get familiar with it. That's what the incubation is for. You can fast fail in that zone. If you fast fail in the performance zone, you get fired. If you fast fail in the productivity zone, you go to jail. Okay? But in the incubation zone, you're supposed to figure it out. Once you get your hands dirty, you can figure out, is this something we should take into the productivity zone and just use it to optimize our operations? Is this something we should take into the performance zone and modernize our operating model? Or is this a time to make the big bet with the transformation zone? And my point to you is, I think all three of these are legitimate options. You know, I think Silicon Valley wants to say transformation is the only thing that, you know, that real men transform. I don't believe that. I actually think transformations are the exception, not the rule. But when they come, they have to be treated with special attention. So that's the framework I wanted to share with you. I want to say thank you very much. Hope you have a great World of Watson for the rest of the time. Thanks.
A big thank you to Geoffrey Moore. I have to say, that J-curve thing, when it comes to my Vegas gambling so far, I'm right at the bottom of that J. I don't even think J is the right letter. We're done for today. More amazing innovation talks tomorrow. We've got 4 fabulous ones. Check your agendas, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great night. Thank you.